Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we are discussing the world of EdTech from EdTech influencers themselves. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Tisha Richmond. Tisha is a podcaster, author, speaker, EdTech influencer, Canva learning consultant, and district student engagement specialist. You may know her from her time on Twitter and her book called Make Learning Magical. In this episode, we discuss all the ways of which EdTech can really reinvigorate and revive your teaching, as well as what to do and how to really get started being a connected educator and bring EdTech to your classroom. I hope that you find value in this episode, and I cannot wait to share how you can make your learning magical too. So tune in, turn it up, and as always, let's get ready to do this. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Leena Marie Saleh, the Edtech Guru. I want to thank you so much for spending time with me on this journey, for all the support that you give me, and for following along. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and let's get ready to do this. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by Tisha Richmond. She is a Canva learning consultant, district student engagement specialist, author, and podcaster. Tisha, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's such an honor to be on your show, Leena. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to have you on and to be able to share your story. So, we always kick off each episode by asking this question of how we always kick off every episode, just sharing your story and how you got to where you are today.
Well, my story started back when I graduated from college. I graduated as a family and consumer science educator, and so started in education right out of my college experience and begun teaching in San Diego. I was at a high school there for 5 years teaching culinary arts, and then moved to Oregon and wanted to be a full-time mom for a while. And so I did that for 5 years before jumping back into education, and have been in the same district for this entire career. I have been teaching and leading in a district called the Medford School District. It's in Southern Oregon. And so for about 17 to 20 of those years, I was teaching in the culinary arts classroom. I also taught interior design, which I loved. So fun teaching both of those subject areas. And then it was about 2014 that things really started to shift for me, and I started getting really into educational technology. And that's a whole story that I can dive into here if you'd like me to. But it really led me into becoming passionate about ed tech, and a position opened in my district to become a tech integration specialist. And so it was the first time we'd ever had one in our district. And so I applied and became a tech integration specialist that supported all 20 schools in our district. And that was about 2 years before COVID happened. And so I basically was leading our district in that time through jumping into a learning management system. We brought Canvas into our district, helping our teachers navigate this remote, landscape that we were all forced to be in. And I learned so much through that time. It was amazing. And then moved into more of a student engagement and professional development role within my district. And now I get to do that, and I get to be a Canva learning consultant, which I just love so much. I love being part of the team and getting to help empower students worldwide in just really being able to amplify their learning in just multiple ways. It's been an absolute honor to be able to do that. And I also, in my journey, had the opportunity to write a book called Make Learning Magical. It's about transforming your teaching and creating unforgettable experiences in your classroom. I wrote that book for Dave Bridges Consulting, and it's my heart, it's my passion to really be able to bring joy into teaching and learning and really make those learning experiences magical for all students.
It's so powerful to be able to bring joy to education because it can be isolating, it can be joyless, it can be just overwhelming. So it's really great to basically have somebody that shares that same passion and be able to share your passion with others. But before we get into more about the book and the other things that you're doing, you had mentioned that you had moved into your role of an integration specialist basically before anyone else in your district had gotten there, and then a few years before COVID. So, what was that experience like from moving to the classroom to being an integration specialist and like navigating that journey as being the first one?
Yeah. Well, it was a really hard decision, honestly, because I moved into the role when I actually was loving teaching. A couple years prior, I had come to a point in my teaching journey where I was burnout. I was stressed. I was really contemplating lots of other things and contemplating leaving education. And when technology came into my classroom and I started really jumping out there and taking risks and trying new things, my teaching experience completely changed and shifted. And I became a much more joyful teacher. I was really able to change the learning landscape in my classroom, and my students were becoming not only more engaged, but empowered as learners. And so when I had the opportunity to move into this role, I had had a transformation. Like I was loving what I was doing, and I was probably having the best time in teaching that I've ever had. And so I had a lot of conversations with my mentors at that time and just said, this opportunity came up and I don't know what to do because I actually am really I'm loving what I'm doing. And I remember one of my mentors asked me, do you think moving into this role will allow you to amplify your impact? And I thought about that question for a long time. And I thought, yes, I do think it will allow me to amplify my impact. I know that I'm making an impact in my school, in my classroom, in the students that I serve. But by moving out of the classroom and moving into this district role, now I have the opportunity to amplify my impact in a much larger way and really help to transform other classes besides my own. And that was really what I needed to work through to really decide that this was a move that I wanted to make. And I am so glad that I did, because that move opened up so many other opportunities for me. It allowed me to impact so many other classrooms and teachers' journeys. And of course, like there's days where I'm like, oh, like that, I miss posting pictures of food on Twitter. I miss having like building those relationships with kids because they were very, very powerful. Like that was such a meaningful and special time for me. But I know that that move also really allowed me to do more than I could have possibly imagined being able to do. So,
I think as an educator, oftentimes teachers are like, I'm so unhappy. And you mentioned burnout and, in your classroom. And we've all been there, right? We've all experienced that burnout and just being like, oh, how can I take another day? I just want to do something else. But I think often sometimes you get this like imposter syndrome, like of you're so comfortable in your situation and you don't think about moving around the district or moving to different places. So I think it's neat that you were able to do that, but then also just, you were in a really good place teaching too, where you started to, and we'll talk about embracing ed tech here in a few minutes, but just I guess sometimes just changing your perspective is also like a good thing to do as well.
absolutely. It's just interesting getting to talk to different educators and the paths that they've taken. But I think for me, throughout my journey, it's been important for me to really allow my journey to take the direction that it's naturally going to take, right? And when opportunities become apparent, you have the opportunity to take that opportunity or not. And so I am one that doesn't mind change. I like change, but I have learned that sometimes you just need to take the leap and you need to take that risk and jump out of your comfort zone, because you never know where those opportunities are going to lead you. And they've led me on some pretty amazing adventures.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Let's talk about ed tech since we're kind of finding ourselves naturally going there. So
Mhm.
you said that embracing technology in your classroom kind of changed your perspective or helped basically re-energize not only you, but your students. So could you share a little bit and expand a little bit more on that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was 2014 that I was completely burnt out as an educator. I was dialed in. I was going through all the motions. I'd been teaching for quite a long time, but I was finding that I wasn't as excited about teaching anymore. And I'd actually lost my joy. And I had a sign that was hanging by my classroom door. It was a Julia Child's quote, because I was a culinary arts teacher, and it said, "Above all, have a good time." And there was a moment when I looked at that sign and I realized that I wasn't anymore. I wasn't having a good time teaching. And I thought, wow, that's scary. If I have this sign by my door asking my students to have a good time, but I can't find the joy in teaching, I'm not having a good time, then how does that impact my students? And so it happened to be that year that all of the culinary teachers in my region were going to be putting in kind of this joint grant for iPads in the classroom. My school was not one-to-one, so this was a new thing for me to even know what a one-to-one classroom would look like. And it was a year that I was really contemplating leaving education. And so the thought of bringing these iPads into my classroom was really scary. Like, there was something exciting about it, but it was also very daunting because I was dialed in. I'd done things the same way for a really long time. I had workflows in place. I had lessons in place, all of the things. But these iPads did come into my classroom. I had one-to-one devices for all of my students. And I had only experienced iPads at that point from a personal perspective. Like, I had my own iPad, but I had never used it for learning before. So I knew in order to bring these iPads into the classroom that I would need to get some professional development. And so part of my funding, part of the grant, was to get professional development. And so I went to my first EdTech conference. It was called iPad Palooza. It was in Austin, Texas. And I went to that conference, and it was just like my whole world opened up, because I was finding that there was all of these innovative ways to use these devices that I had never thought of. There were strategies that people were sharing that just never was something that it was even in my realm of understanding. And I was finding that I was learning from these educators that were not culinary arts teachers. They were English teachers. They were elementary teachers. They were librarians. They were counselors, like all of these different roles in education I was learning from. And I was finding that I was learning these new ideas, and I was taking them and I was translating that to what would that look like in a culinary arts classroom. And I also found at that conference that people were connected on Twitter, and they were sharing handles, and they were sharing resources on Twitter. And there was even some like contests and things that were going on where people could win stuff. And so I'm like, what is this edu Twitter space? Like, I don't know what this is all about. And so I signed up for a Twitter. I might have had a Twitter account, but I for sure wasn't using it for education. So I got in and I started like following these people. That conference experience led to another conference experience in Miami called Miami Device, where I really started making some face-to-face connections with educators. And I really began to get connected on social media. And I started to lurk a lot. I wasn't really brave at that point to post a lot, but I was lurking a lot and gathering ideas. And slowly but surely, those ideas started to trickle into my classroom as I was reimagining what they would look like in culinary arts. And I was finding new ways to use these devices that had come into my classroom. And I was finding through that process that I was becoming more courageous. I was trying new things. I was disrupting this way of teaching that had been dialed in for so many years. And it was not easy. Like, it was uncomfortable for sure. There were days where I'm like, I don't know, maybe I should give these iPads back, because this is really messy. Like, this is totally unraveling everything that I've ever done. But what I found is that my students started to respond to this new tech that I was bringing into my classroom in a really positive way. And they were not only becoming more engaged learners, and it was a hands-on environment. This is culinary arts. They were cooking, they were doing, but they were responding so much differently than they ever responded before. And they were becoming empowered as learners. They were owning their learning. And so that totally changed everything for me, because I thought, wow, like, I don't have this isn't as dialed in as it was before. However, I'm finding that my students are more engaged, more empowered. So I am on the right track here. Like, I need to continue going down this path. And what I started finding was that I let go of that idea of being perfect and having everything like tied in this beautiful bow before I delivered it to my class. I started to relax a little bit and thought, wow, how powerful when our students can lead the learning, and how powerful when I invite my students on this learning with me. So when I bring in a new app or a new strategy, like just being transparent and saying, this is a new thing. Like, I think I have this great idea here, but help me. Like, let's learn this together. And just being transparent and allowing my students to join me in that learning adventure totally changed the way that I approach teaching in my classroom. And it was contagious, right? So, like, when we start changing things up, when we start seeing students become empowered learners, and we start seeing that learning landscape being transformed, like, there's no way you're going back to the way you did it before. Like, you have to keep moving forward and you have to continue taking risks. And I had to continue to find a different workflow that made sense for now this new world of bringing technology into the classroom. And so really that was what led to my book, Make Learning Magical, was because through that process of becoming a connected educator, taking risks, thinking about how I could bring innovative ideas into my classroom, how I thought about even things like how I start class and how I welcome students into my class, how I could become more authentic as a teacher and really allow my students to have more agency in the learning. Bringing in gamified strategies, that was a huge part of my transformation. And just really thinking about embracing that creativity, that collaboration, that critical thinking, the communication, allowing my students to become curious learners. And ultimately, like, how can we empower our students to leave our classrooms and create their own legacy in this world? And so that was kind of how Make Learning Magical came about, because magical is actually an acronym that stands for memorable beginnings, authenticity and agency, gamified experiences, innovation, creativity, collaboration, curiosity, authentic audience, and legacy. And those were the keys. Once I really reflected on what was happening in my classroom, those were the keys that really unlocked that magical learning environment for my students and really changed the whole game for me and brought joy back to the teaching experience.
There's a lot there, but when I think about, when I hear what you're saying, is there's a lot to it, and it's that things are going to get messy and that you're going to be uncomfortable and you have to live in the uncomfortable state. I like to think about tech as, I probably should, this isn't politically correct, but like as a gateway drug. Basically, once you open the window, you never want
Yes.
to go backwards through the window. You just want to keep going and keep opening new doors and keep, opening new windows. And it's just amazing. I think the part that is the reason for why everyone should embrace EdTech as a learning tool and not like a game or, just, playing
Yeah.
computer games in your classroom, but actually like embracing it as a tool, is because of what students then do. They become more empowered. They are more engaged. They have more ownership. And then they're willing to actually even then themselves take risks, take learning risks. And I think that's an important part that is often overlooked. It's like, oh, it's another tool, or oh, it's another thing. And yes, districts do mandate those things. And I know that's true. But if you can embrace a tool and do it really well, it just will do so many things for you. Re-energize you. You'll feel innovative, and your students are just going to be more excited about being in your classroom than they will when you continue doing, the old strategies of, you say, being dialed in to what you're doing every single day. But once you take that risk, it's just the best risk I think you'll ever take.
100%. It's so fun for me. In my district role, I get to go into classrooms and I get to teach lessons. And I was in a classroom this week, one getting to share Canva and getting to lead a lesson in Canva with fifth grade students. And then I was in another classroom in fourth grade, and I got to lead a breakout EDU experience. And it's amazing to be in those classes. These are not my kids, right? Like, I don't know them. Haven't built relationships with them, but to see the teachers in that class with me, because we're co-facilitating this lesson together, right? They're the ones that know their kids, but I'm leading the lesson. And to see these teachers observing their kids learning and engaging in a different way than they've ever engaged before. And to see some of these learners that typically might not be super engaged or may not really have had the opportunity to shine before, now all of a sudden they're shining and they're showing what they know in these really creative ways. And to see these teachers recognize that is so, so powerful. And I was in a classroom this week and these kids had never been in Canva before. And I did it. What's amazing is that like I didn't have to do a very big tutorial because these kids, like they know they're on their devices all the time. They know how it all works, right? And so, but I didn't go into like deep like tools within the app. These kids found them on their own. So they were creating a book cover. And I would say 5-10 minutes in, this girl calls me over and she says, I found the draw tool. And she says, I'm actually illustrating on my book cover. And she was so excited, so proud. And it just was the coolest moment because here's this kid, and I'm pretty sure this kid, just from my conversation with the teacher, doesn't typically engage in that way in learning. And here she is like calling me over, a stranger, someone that she really hasn't developed a relationship with, to tell me what she's discovered and how excited she was about it. So yeah, it's powerful. It's powerful when we can decide to embrace it and bring it into learning. Our kids are gonna surprise us for sure.
Yeah, and that's my favorite part is being able to. I think it amplifies voices that don't often get amplified, and I think that the pandemic actually did that for a lot of kids. Whatever we feel about the whole situation is a lot of kids first time got really one-on-one attention and intervention, and they were able to speak and advocate for themselves, and that's what technology does for them. And that experience with that student warms my heart because that's what can happen with all your students when you embrace ed tech as a tool in your classroom.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes that teachers get nervous because it disrupts the workflow, right? And we have these procedures, we have these ways of doing things that's disruptive. But when you really can find that new workflow, and it did take me that time to like figure out, okay, what does this new workflow look like? And how can I be most efficient in the work that I do and in the delivery of instruction, like to and from the student teacher? Once I really dialed that in, I really found that the technology made it so much easier, like so much easier. And I think that that's sometimes the messiness that's hard to get through to get to that really sweet spot, where not only are we amplifying our students' voices in ways that we've never amplified them before, but really we're creating a more efficient workflow as an educator. And so I just encourage those of you who are like, but it's so messy. It's like, yes, it is. Like it takes some time, but you're going to find that there are so many rewards when you work through that and you are able to kind of find that sweet spot.
Yeah. And I think the gift of time is what you'll actually get back
Yeah,
because once you start iterating your lessons, it becomes more efficient and you can adapt and modify much quicker. And you have this repository that you can you can just adjust and pivot and adapt. And that's just like the best thing that you can do for yourself, I think also.
absolutely. It changed everything for me. And so I'm so grateful those iPads came into my classroom.
And the iPad-apalooza or whatever, however you say that conference name in Austin is interesting because I presented at that, I think the year after. So it's quite
That's
interesting. But to think about how we don't necessarily now love iPads, like we loved them then, but they were such I mean, they still have their place, but conference. So talking about that, and you mentioned, Twitter, and you had used Twitter personally, but not a Twitter to basically connect with other educators. And so, you started lurking, which is how we all start, right? We start as like little, I say a voyeur, like I'm just hanging out, watching, observing until you're ready to take that risk. But those teachers, even back then in 2014, 2015, they were sharing resources on Twitter. And so you were able to quietly adapt them and bring them into your classroom. So as a educator who might not be connected, what do you feel are the most important aspects for why they should consider being connected educators?
I will tell you that I would be at nowhere near the place in my educational journey as I am today if I hadn't been connected. It just has It absolutely changed my whole trajectory. And that year when I started getting connected at iPad Palooza, I started following educators that were speaking, and that kind of led to other educators that I followed. But it really opened up my perspective on what education was all about, because I was living in rural Southern Oregon. I connected with people in my PLC, right? Career and technical educators, maybe teachers in the hallway at staff meetings, maybe once in a while across district or across region. But I was in this little bubble of what was happening in education based on the people that I was talking to in an in-person environment. And so when I started getting connected and I started following educators from around the globe, like throughout the US, but beyond, I started realizing how much I was missing out on and how much I needed to just open my eyes to possibilities. And like I mentioned before, I had been living in kind of this silo as an educator where I was only really taking ideas from other culinary teachers or other people in career and technical education. And maybe I was finding websites, right, that they had resources. And so I was taking those resources, but it was very, like, I can probably count on my hand the number of sites that I would go to on a regular basis for ideas. But now, like, all of these ideas were opened up to me, and it really allowed me to think creatively too, because a lot of the ideas were not from culinary educators. They were from educators of different subject areas. So I really had to personalize those ideas and strategies and become innovative in how I would bring them in to my classroom environment. But I also started connecting on Twitter chats, and I started Twitter chats, for those of you who don't know, happen 24/7, depending on different time zones. And a lot of times they'll have a chat that happens every week at the same time. And it might be an hour, it might be a half hour of questions that a community is engaging in. And so you follow a hashtag and you're engaging in those conversations. And that's really how I started connecting at a deeper level, because now I was following all these people, but then I was joining these communities that were passionate about the same things in education that I was. And I was having conversations with them, about those topics, about those things. And sometimes it would mean that somebody talked about an idea or strategy, and I'd be like, tell me more. And we'd get to have a side conversation about that strategy. And that is so, so powerful when you start making those connections. And what's really cool is that I was making connections so much that now when I went to conferences, I would see these people that I was connected to on social media, and then it would make those connections so much more powerful and more real because I was getting to meet them in person. And I will just say that some of the friends that I have met on social media, the connections I met on social media have become some of my closest friends for real, like honestly. And they're real friendships because you are able to connect with people who share that same excitement and passion as you do. And they also challenge you to think bigger, right? And so sometimes in our own buildings, we might get frustrated. We might not feel like anybody gets us, or we don't feel that sense of connection. Or maybe there's a lot of negativity that you just get tied into. You can go to social media and spaces like Twitter and find your people that share that same excitement and passion as you do, and you can get re-energized. So I mean, I can't speak highly enough about it because it's changed my journey. But I will say that when you are getting connected for the first time, be intentional about how you're connecting. So when I connect, especially when I started connecting on social media, I was very intentional about following people who were going to inspire me, who were going to challenge me, and were going to help make me a better educator. Because of course, there is some negativity in social media too. So I think it's important on how you are building your network is going to impact your experience on social media for sure.
And so you chose Twitter as like your first, like really jumping off point. If you were to give advice to an educator who's, not connected, where do you think would be the best place for them to start their journey?
Yeah, well, I think each platform kind of has a different feel, right? So Twitter for me was the first place I connected. And so that's really what I latched onto because I was having those Twitter conversations, those Twitter chats, and those kinds of things. And it was a great way to get a lot of ideas and engage in a lot of conversations. Instagram is much more of a visual place, right? And so there is a lot of great learning there too. but it just comes in a different format. And so I think one thing to pay attention to is what speaks to you. Like where do you gravitate? If you gravitate to Instagram, then maybe that's the platform that you want to really get connected on. If you gravitate to a platform like Twitter, maybe that's where you want to start. Facebook is a whole other type of platform, right? And I think Facebook communities are great for that, really, like you are in a community of people that are going to engage around a specific topic area, or maybe you are engaging with educators that are in a certain part of education, but you're not necessarily getting a much broader perspective that you would in your Instagram or Twitter spaces. And so I think each has kind of a different vibe, a different purpose. LinkedIn, I think, is great when you are really wanting to network and build those career connections. I think that's a really powerful place too. I have tried to get connected in all the places, but I will still say that Twitter for me is where I am most connected, because that's where my journey began. So I don't think that there's a right or wrong, but I think that you just have to find the place that feels right to you.
I definitely agree with that. And I think it just depends on like kind of exactly what you said, like seeking. And I do think just wherever feels comfortable to you. I find that Instagram, for me, I just find it to be more challenging to connect, only because it's not really like a place of like two-way communication in the same way that like Twitter or even like LinkedIn or, even Facebook can be. So I find that to be the least place where I can like build community. I think it's really great for like sharing visuals or like, a demo maybe that you want to share or something like that. So I think it just depends. But, my colleagues who are in Australia, they love Instagram. They say that is their PLC of choice for their region. So it just depends on where you are and how you're doing it. It doesn't matter. Just put yourself out and just try, because it's going to be nerve-wracking. It's going to be scary, but you will be amazed, just like when you try Edtech for the first time, how much you'll learn from just being connected that will change your perspective on teaching as well.
Absolutely. And I would say too that there's power in hashtags. So if you want to start, especially finding your people on social media, start following hashtags that have to do with the area that you're passionate about or you're interested in. And so on Twitter, for example, if you search specific hashtags, Canva EDU, for example, right? You're going to get all of these people that are continually sharing their ideas and strategies about Canva. And you're going to start becoming part of that community. And you're going to start like finding people who are sharing things that really resonate with you. And you're going to start developing that connection. Same thing with Instagram. And that's where you're also going to find a lot of your chats that are going to happen on Twitter, is by following those hashtags. So definitely start kind of finding your people and those communities that are going to be most beneficial to you.
And there's hashtags for everything. There's CTE ones, there is computer science, there's math, there's whatever. So there's a hashtag for everyone. So just follow those. And I think that's a really good tip. So you have also your own podcast. You have written a book. You are writing a book now with your son. And you just started another podcast with another Canva learning consultant. So do you want to share a little bit about the work that you're doing to amplify the voices in Edtech?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, like I said before, it has been a journey, and just one leap out of my comfort zone has led to another leap and another experience. And so I'm so grateful for that journey of just learning. And I remember it was, oh gosh, I think it was in like 2018 or 19 that I was having a conversation with a friend and mentor who also happens to be a DBC author, Adam Welcome. And he happened to be in my area. And so we were chatting, and he's one of those people that just says, you need to do it. Like, what are you doing to amplify your voice? And so we started talking about podcasting, and I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. I really don't know how to get started. And he shared this Anchor app, and I thought, well, maybe I'll give it a try. And so I was on my way to Portland. My daughter was at the University of Portland at the time with my husband, and we were driving. And so I'm like, I'm going to check out this Anchor app that Adam mentioned. So I get on the Anchor app and I decide to record an episode while I'm on the drive with my husband. Like, talk about taking risks, right? That are so random. And so we decided to record a podcast episode, and It was so messy. It was really, the audio was awful. Like there was trucks going by, all of the things, but I'm like, if I don't just jump out and try this, I'm never going to do it. And that's literally where the podcast started for Make Learning Magical. And you can still hear that podcast episode. I think my husband and I recorded maybe 2 or 3 episodes while we were in the car. And I love that though, because that just shows the beginning of my journey and how my journey has been refined, and my podcast has hopefully increasingly gotten better over time, right? But it's been a wonderful way for me to be able to amplify the voices of others. And I have had so many amazing interviews with amazing thought leaders and educators from around the globe. And I mean, I think about just the time of the pandemic when we were all going through such wild times, and just to be able to talk with educators and connect in that way was so powerful for me, like really helped me feel connected during that time. But I felt over time too, it's really allowed me to become more of an articulate speaker, but it's also helped me become a better listener, because you are constantly like trying to think through like what they're talking about so that you have a response, right? And so it's allowed me just to be better at conversation, I think, by having a podcast. And I'm just so grateful for just all of the amazing conversations I've had. And I've become, I don't know, I think, speaking of perspective, like my perspective has become so much wider since I have had this opportunity to speak with guests, because I've had these just really wonderful conversations one-on-one that I normally wouldn't have had. And then recently, Liz Bostwick, who, like you mentioned, is a Canva learning consultant as well, just really started recognizing that our passion and our messages from our 2 books are very similar, in how we are so passionate about bringing joy into education, how we're so passionate about empowering students in their learning experience. And so we decided that we would start this podcast to be able to really hear from and amplify voices from all different thought leaders and educators globally about what that means to them. Like, how are they really able to bring joy into education, and how are they empowering students? And so super excited about the project. We just launched it a couple weeks back. We've had our first guest episode launched today, actually. And so that's really exciting. Lavana Roth, who is an amazing educator, was on our show. I'm excited to see where that journey leads us. And then the project with my son, oh my gosh, my heart. It has been a message that's been on my heart for a long time. It was a story that I wanted to share, but I didn't know how to share it. It just came out in a children's book. It came out in the words of this children's book. And I knew that I wanted my son to have the first opportunity to illustrate it, because the story was inspired by him and his journey in school. I remember writing it. I kind of wrote it one night, and I remember calling him, and it was really late on the East Coast. And I asked him if he could talk, and he's like, "Could you just call me in the morning? I've already gone to bed." And I'm like, "Okay." So I call him in the morning, and I said, "Tommy, I wrote this story. I want to read it to you." And I read it to him, and I said, "It was inspired by you. And I can't think of anybody that I'd want more to illustrate this story than you. I want to give you the first opportunity." And he said yes. And I honestly didn't know if he would. And I was just over the moon excited. And so we started talking about, the illustrations. And anyway, we submitted our manuscript right before the holiday break in December. And so we found out soon after Christmas, actually, that DBC was going to publish it. And so we just have been so thrilled. And just to have this opportunity for us to collaborate and bond over this book it's like a mother's dream, right? Just to be able to connect in that way with your kids. And so it's been an amazing journey, and we're hoping to release it close to ISTE. So we'll see if we stay on track, but I'm really, really excited to share the story with the world, and to share my son's illustrations too.
That's so fun. And I don't know, just, yeah, exactly. Like just a joy, right? Like that's what we want to have. But I think all the projects that you work on are so great, because you are amplifying voices and, highlighting those. And I just think, and bringing joy to education, that's what we want, right? Like, as
Yeah.
educators, that is our dream. We want to work and empower students and empower educators, and just it's just hard. So we want to be able to make it as magical as possible for you. So I think that's really great. Before we wrap up today's episode though, I do want to ask you if a new teacher or a seasoned veteran was looking to start exploring EdTech in their classrooms, what tools or tips would you give for these educators?
Well, you know that I have to say Canva.
I know every episode, everyone said Canva. You guys, I did not pay anyone to say these things. These are authentic conversations that are coming right out of everyone's mouth. So
well,
we
here's the
both
thing.
love it. That's
We
it.
do. And honestly, that is why I am a Canva learning consultant, because like I 100% believe in the platform so much. And I've seen it firsthand, the power that it has when students are able to demonstrate their learning in multiple ways. And my journey with Canva actually started in 2014 when I started to host and take part in Twitter chats. And so I was co-hosting a Twitter chat at the time, and I was creating all my social media graphics on Canva. And I fell in love with it, and I was using it all the time. And then I started making resources for my classroom, and Canva for Education hadn't come onto the scene yet, but my students were using the free version, like before Canva for Education version, in their learning and creating recipes and menus and logos for their food truck race that we were doing in our classroom and all these things. And I saw how much they loved it. And so I have been hooked on this platform for so long. And then when Canva for Education came on the scene, oh my goodness, game changed. Like, it's incredible how this platform really allows students to demonstrate their learning in absolutely phenomenal ways. And to see, I mean, talk about magical learning, to see students come alive, getting to show what they know and getting to show their creativity and getting to collaborate in these new ways. It's just a powerful, powerful thing. And so it really does come from a very authentic place, because I've experienced it in my own journey as an educator. I've experienced it with students in my own classroom. And now I'm able to go into other classrooms and get to see the power. And it's just intuitive. It's like a one-stop shop that makes sense, right? Like some platforms try to be one-stop shops, and like some things just don't work quite the way that they maybe should. Canva really is a one-stop shop for so many things that you wouldn't even think of, like even being able to create QR codes within Canva. I mean, getting to use the draw tool, getting to embed things, and they have so many amazing partnerships with so many other platforms too. And that's another thing that I really appreciate, when platforms can be friends with a lot of other platforms, right? Like, we're all in this together. And so when you can find platforms that really get along and work with a lot of other platforms, it just makes all of our lives more joyful.
Yeah, I would agree. And on the note of Canva, and I also am a big advocate. Obviously, everyone knows this. I've been using Canva for as long as you've been using Canva. I used it. I first started making them for our school play. Someone gave me the playbill and it was so ugly. I was like, I can't do this. And they wanted me to make it in like Adobe or something. I was like, oh, this is so complicated. I don't want to do it this way. So I put it in Canva and I was like, oh, this is like worlds and bounds easier than like doing a Google slide or like whatever. But you can screen record, you can easily embed stuff inside of it. You can do talking presentation, like the amount of things that you can do as an educator, and just to like amplify and save money is what's so crazy, because you buy a tool for video editing, you buy a tool for this, you buy a tool for that. You can literally do so much and save yourself the money that you normally have to spend out of pocket, which I think that's also very special.
Absolutely. Well, and just the sharing, the ways that you're able to share through Canva is incredible. I mean, you can download in multiple ways, whether it's PNG, JPEG, PDF, GIF. You can do like the SRV files for vector graphics. You are able to share view only links, comment or edit, so you can bring people in as collaborators. And so and like so mmany more. Like if you have Canva and you go into that more menu in the share, like you're mind blown. Like
Every time I go in there too. I mean, I work at Canva and every time I go in the menu, I'm like, wow, this is like a new one. This is sweet. And then you check them out and you're like, wow, these are so many ways that you can share your designs and go back and forth, export it to Google, bring it back in. Like there's all different ways that you can do those things.
Yeah, it's really powerful. And you also are, I mean, one of the great things about bringing Canva into your district is that you have these LMS integrations. It'll bring it right into your single sign-on. So just talking about that efficiency, right? And streamlining things for educators. Now, everybody, staff, students, educators are all able to access it from the place that they're accessing all of their other platforms. And you are able to integrate with whatever learning management systems you're using, whether that is Schoology or Canvas or Google Classroom. And if you don't use any of those things, Canvas Canvas has no problem. Like we're going to create a classroom assignment workflow for you, and you're going to be able to find that in Canva as well. And so really it takes all of those fears that a lot of educators have about like how, like I want to, but is it going to be complicated? How is this going to work with, the way that I do things in my classroom? It really takes that guesswork out for you. It just makes it easy to empower learners.
Yep. Okay. Well, this was so much fun. And I'm so happy that you came on to share your story. And I promise this was not just a plug for Canva, although I am plugging Canva because it's amazing and you are missing out as an educator if you haven't tried it yet. But we will make sure that we share everything about Tisha down below, her Make Learning Magical podcast, the one that she's doing with Liz, any information that we can for you to connect with her. And she's at a lot of conferences. So make sure that you attend a session that she's in as well. Tisha, thank you so, so much for being on today.
Thank you. It's been an honor and so much fun.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. We will see you guys next time. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much. You've made it this far. We are so thankful that you're here. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, thumbs up, comment below, and join us for all of our next videos. Thank you so much for joining us as we disrupt education together. See you guys soon. Bye, everybody.